Hello, this is Cryptolyze. Hope you are doing well. This Thursday, August 3, 2023, it is with pleasure that we meet today to talk about ROSE, the crypto of OASIS Foundation. So with that, we're going to do a video, as usual, dissected into two parts. A fundamental part where we will come back to what ROSE is, its usefulness in OASIS and what OASIS is with its topicality. And then we will go to the technical part. In the purely technical analysis, we will project ourselves in the short, medium, long term on purchase prices, selling prices. And you will see that we have small setups that are interesting, and it starts right away. OASIS is an infrastructure blockchain, so it's layer 1. You're getting used to it now. It is a blockchain that aims to create an infrastructure for developers to build decentralized applications on it. It's the business model, and it's their will. They have a specificity. It is that they set up what is called privacy in the blockchain. So you have to understand that the blockchain, when you write a smart contract, so which is the piece of code that allows the interactions between us, the protocol, and the blockchain to be able, for example, to rule that if I open insurance or that I lend money, I can recover it. It's called the smart contracts that are used. But these smart contracts, they are public. They are put on the blockchain in which people can read absolutely everything. And so here we have a problem in the sense that if we ever execute, so we send information through a smart contract and the information comes out, we will have here, everything is visible, okay? Where there is what we call private data, but which is not necessarily private, which can be hacked, so we can recover it that way. So we have a privacy problem here at the level of execution of smart contracts. And OASIS Foundation has implemented a solution to be able to circumvent that through what is called the secure enclave, in which we will have an execution that will take place in a block. And this block is protected and is outside any regard, which makes it possible to have precisely this execution separately and therefore not to have any loss of privacy here when a smart contract is executed. Next, they have implemented what they call the paratime layer. So overall, what is it? These are subnets that are dependent on the consensus layer, therefore implied by the OASIS, in which we will have, for example, the EVM compatible paratime, which will be Saphir, which mainly allows to be EVM compatible and at the same secure time in which we have this enclave. So it allows us to execute call solidity, so code that is found, for example, on Ethereum, directly within OASIS and within Saphir to be able to perform it. So it's a protocol that is rather interesting, that solves a large part of the problems that we have in the execution of Esper contract, but that still has a lot of worries for having used it in one of the projects that I am developing, in which my team is developing. We still have problems of management, of interconnection between the two. We are going to have problems of structuring. And above all, we have problems of interoperability. That is to say that it is very nice to have that. But if you don't have strong interoperability, that is to say in which you can switch, for example, from Polygon to ROSE very easily in order to be able to execute, it won't necessarily have a big interest. It means that people are forced to stay on ROSE and OASIS, and it's not going to be interesting in the long term. So it is imperative to monitor whether or not we will have this notion of interoperability that will be managed, because from the moment we can call smart contracts that are on OASIS from another blockchain to be able to execute and come back, there we will have a very strong real interest. Another thing I would like to emphasize is that in the different elements and in the different projects that are being developed in OASIS, we don't necessarily have big interest. We don't necessarily have very, very big. So the ecosystem is a bit soft. We're not going to hide it. And so it's a bit complicated, especially when you develop a project, to find documentation, to find competent people to be able to interact with us. And this is one of the difficulties that I will really give to OASIS. At the level of the token, the euros in themselves serve as a supply. Will also be used at the level of staking, protection, and payment of transactions, something which is rather classic with a division of 57%. So we haven't completely divided yet. We have a max supply of 10 billion, which is still relatively substantial, so we're still very careful. There's still downward pressure linked to that. Another thing to consider is that they are actually working on what I told you, the notion of interoperability, but it remains relatively inaccessible and relatively unimplemented currently, so we have to take a little bit more, even a lot of distance from that. I think we could have real news that will certainly be made at the beginning of next year. Before, it seems relatively complicated to me in terms of the state of the actual project and its implementation in the OASIS ecosystem. That being said, it's a project that is very interesting that you have to follow and that I follow personally. Am I exposed to the OASIS? Not necessarily, at least in pink. only for transaction fee purposes, but we are still in something, for me, that I am, and that I will wait to have a setup. And this is where it is interesting to pass on the technical part. If you like this video, put a like. It always makes me very happy, especially it supports the channel. And at the level of technical analysis, you will see that we are in a setup that is rather interesting. Before talking about the setup, we will rather talk about the upward acceleration that we had there, in which we were relatively built in several effective times. So we have something that is very built with an ATH that was made in January 2022. It's interesting precisely because we had a first bull run phase in which we had September 2021, November 2021, and then we had yet another acceleration on January 2022, while we had a whole crypto and macro market which was rather on a downward curve shape, and precisely we had a rose which made a bullish acceleration. It did not last too long. We had a very big candle in a week, and the following week we swallowed almost everything with behind the bearish breakout, and precisely we did not have, as on the BTC and other cryptos in which we had January, February, March, with an acceleration like that was rather the opposite at the level of rose, in which we were in the process of collapsing, but which is rather logical given that we have a supply which is relatively weak. We are on a market cap which is relatively weak. 200 million currently diluted makes 400, 450, something like that. So we are on an asset which is relatively weak and has a low market cap. Okay, so we are still doing very attention. At the level of the current dynamic, we had a break in 3 times at BC, which is something classic. And then in the lower part, we find in a form of long-term accumulation of weekends off, something very classic, where we have the selling climax, therefore the bearish latency stop, we retrace, we do the automatic rally, therefore the R, and then we break down again by taking the liquidity of the SC, by doing the second stop space B, therefore a low liquidity intake, before having a bullish reaction and a reacceleration. What is important to see is that on the breakout here of the SCC, this big candle there, we see that we don't have to rework at the start, go back to the top, but that we have not broken here. The batch which was made in December 2022 in particular, which was an FTX position in which we had a leak of liquidity from the crypto markets, and it was much more marked on the market gap batches, and in particular the euro suffered on this side. So for me, on my side, we have here an effective break of structure. We have a bearish retest, which is in the process of being done. And if we look here, I think that we should not be too far here from the 786, in which we did a nice retest. Potentially we can do a little bearish continuity on the 886. But I think that for me, we are not too far from to have a setup where we can have a bullish acceleration. We are really in an accumulation range zone here. What we are going to expect is going to be a break in the range with a break here in the 0.086, have a retest, and then come away with the break here in the 0.11 for the air break and the grip air. It's a little bit the setup. I'm going to wait for an acceleration and a position on targets that are relatively coherent. That is to say, breaking the R, yes, but especially here going for 0.33, in which we have a form of delay with February, March, in which we have a lot of people who are stuck between 0.25 and 0.35 with roses. So we will necessarily have a setup. First target for me, and then I'll potentially go for a big wave 1 and a big wave 2 because we have a wake-off distribution going on. BC, Arkansas, ST, jump. So here, stop the uptrend, we retrace, we retest, we sink, we do a recumulation, and we will look for a new ATH with the upthrust, which is classic at week-off level in terms of distribution, and therefore we would look for targets on the UT, which would be wave 1, wave 2, wave 3, impulsive in 1.618, with a token that would be close to the $1, which would bring us to a market cap of 10 billion, which is not totally absurd on a next bull run with an influx of equity. But on the other hand, for that, several things will be needed. 1, an ecosystem that is becoming denser. 2, a real structural utility that is being put in place. And concrete answers to the problems that I exposed to you earlier. If we don't have all that already, we might go retest the AT8s, but we'll stop in that part and we won't look any higher. But if we want to go higher, we can even go much higher than $1 with potentially use and incorporation into all other blockchains in a form of privacy as a service. Why could that be really cool? In any case, as a real concept. If you like this type of video, don't forget to leave me a like, and you'll find the same on SOL, Solana's crypto. And we'll meet tomorrow morning at 7.